Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, and it is such a delight to be back with you, and I trust you have found some of our most recent features, particularly involving Governor Edwards and those Medicaid letters, to be of interest, judging by the number of video views we got, which was almost 500 in one day, of the video of Jay Darden attempting to explain this. I would say that the interest level is high. I do want to say one thing: that number of views would not be possible were it not for a gentleman named Scott McKay at the Hayride, who did a separate feature on that little episode. And as many of you know, Scott and I, we're friends, and I'll make another quick plug. There'll be another Hayride function coming up, and you talk about something you would not want to miss. I believe the next one is in Lafayette. As the date gets closer, I'm sure he'll be putting it out, and I cannot encourage you any stronger to attend one of these Hayride events. You will not be disappointed. All right, let's move on to today's feature. And as you saw in the title, he is back. And so those of you who are longtime viewers may recall, it's hard to believe that it's been almost a year, but very close to a year ago, as many of you know, I started videotaping State Police Commission meetings, and much to my shock, I believe it was the July meeting, if I remember right, Lee Zurich came barreling in, unannounced, and he directly confronted one of the State Police Commission members, specifically Calvin Braxton. And before everything was said, as you know, when Lee Zurich sinks into anything, it's gonna get a lot of attention, and this got a lot of attention. We're going to give you a direct link to the feature that Sound Off Louisiana did on that particular day, because we were flattered and honored that Mr. Zurich, who is an outstanding investigative reporter, actually used some of our footage. What happened is Mr. Zurich came in and directly confronted Mr. Braxton with the fact that there had been a police report filed or documented letter, let's say. Well, first let's back up. Calvin Braxton was appointed to the State Police Commission on June of 2015 during the waning months of Governor Jindal's administration. Many of you may remember around that time frame, Bobby Jindal had very little in the way of having his finger on the pulse of things going on here in Louisiana. In fact, it was right during that time frame that he declared the utterly laughable campaign for the presidency of the United States. But at any rate, Calvin Braxton was appointed by Bobby Jindal in June of 2015. In December of 2015, December 15th, I believe I remember the date right, Calvin Braxton's daughter, Braxton's daughter was pulled over for DWI. So the time frame we're looking at is in between at that time Governor-elect John Bel Edwards having won the election and him being sworn in on whatever it was, the 9th or 10th of January. Which is very interesting timing here. And so Mr. Braxton is pulled over for DWI. I'm sorry, Calvin, if you saw that, you'll know I just misspoke. Calvin's daughter was pulled over for DWI, a fact he readily acknowledged in that subsequent video after Mr. Zurich had left. But at any rate, there was a report issued. Now remember, that was December 15th, 2015. And 6 months later, and that's key, 6 months later, there was a report issued about the incident. And that was the subject of Mr. Zurich's feature. And we're going to give you the link, because I would highly encourage you to go back and look at our feature from that, because it's very informative and it'll bring you up to speed as to what was purported to be the situation. As at least what was there on paper. That's all Lee Zurich had to go on. And so he took that, which was very damning of Calvin Braxton, in that it said that he had said, well, that trooper is not to touch State Police Commission members. Surely he should know that. And wanted him, quote, reassigned for 90 days to New Orleans to, quote, get his head on straight. These are all things that are in the report, and you can find them by easily clicking on our prior feature of the Calvin Braxton situation and Lee Zurich coming in to get a statement from him of what all was going on. Mr. Braxton chose not to speak to Lee Zurich, but he did make an explanation later to the fellow board members, and that's the part that you will see on our feature, and it's also the footage that Mr. Zurich wanted and that we were happy to provide him with. But, you know, in the NFL, whenever a play takes place and the referee has thrown, you know, they made a call, whether it was inbounds or out of bounds, the referee will have to say Zurich in this case because he's the one exposing it. You know, you make the best call you can, and what he had was paper in front of him, and he asked for an explanation of that. Well, in the NFL analogy, the refs have now gone under the hood, and they're conducting further review, and that's what our feature today is about. You know, he's back, and Calvin Braxton has filed a lawsuit against the Louisiana State Troopers Association. Now remember, that's separate and distinct from the Louisiana State Police Commission. If you want some clarification, the State Police Commission is the equivalent of civil service for state troopers. It is a state agency. The Louisiana State Troopers Association, on the other hand, is a non-profit entity that is comprised of active and retired troopers, and they collect dues, they get contributions from the public in order to try to aid troopers as well as their retirees and spouses if there's a death, a thing of that nature. So that's the distinction. State Police Commission is a state agency, serves as civil service. State Troopers Association is a 501c or whatever it is. You know, it is a private equity. I'm sorry, a private organization designed to benefit sheriffs. So it's almost a year later. Calvin Braxton, my impression of him, though I had very, very little interaction with him, because by the time I started filming these meetings, it was only a few before this incident happened and he was gone. But he did, number one, he's certainly not a bashful individual. We're going to give you below this video, we're going to give you a few of episodes that we have of Mr. Braxton. He's certainly not bashful, and he didn't strike me as someone who would likely go quietly in the night. Because what happened is, it turns out that, now remember, the report that's being referenced was filed in 2016, and remember there was a 6-month lag, okay? And the Troopers Association had leaned on Governor Edwards to remove Mr. Braxton from his State Police Commission position as a result of these allegations that he had said, hey, you don't touch a state police commission, they're not to be commissioner, they're not to be touched, and hey, this trooper needs to go down there for 90 days to New Orleans to get his head screwed on straight. And so a year goes by, and then the Troopers Association decides to go ahead and play their hand and go public with this thing, hence Lee Zurich. And what happened is the governor really had little choice at that point but to, I guess, seek Calvin Braxton's resignation. And Calvin Braxton did resign, but as I said, he struck me as someone who was not going to go quietly in the night. So that brings you kind of up to speed, but again, it will help you very much to go to that feature. You're also going to notice an awful lot of overlap between the Braxton and Kathy Durbin situation. And so we're going to give you the link for the Kathy Durbin feature that we put out. That's the infamous one that you didn't find in an Advocate article. You may not ever find what I'm giving to you here in any kind of mainstream media publication, because it's not going to paint the governor in a very favorable light. But at any rate, you may recall on the Kathy Durbin, our initial feature was that Ronnie Jones had apparently, at least according to the pleadings, had said over speakerphone that the governor's office had told Kathy Durbin to shut the F up, okay? About what? Well, we're talking about what were alleged illegal political contributions into, guess who? The campaign of Governor John Bel Edwards. Let's proceed on now. Calvin is removed because of the circumstances I just told you. Again, I want to encourage you to go back to that post that we did on Sound Off Louisiana on Braxton. And so it's now a year later. the refs are under the, using the NFL analogy, the refs are under the hood, and it's being reviewed, and we're going to take a look at the lawsuit. We're going to give you obviously a link for the entirety of the lawsuit, but we're going to hit some high points here because Mr. Braxton, if the referee has said you're out of bounds, Braxton has basically come in and said, I want this play reviewed. I wasn't near out of bounds. You know, I had not just one. Well, in the NFL, you had to have two anyway. But he's basically saying, look, I was 8 inches inbounds. You must be blind as a bat. All right. So that'll give you a little background. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights of the lawsuit and make a little bit of commentary as we go. If you go to paragraph 4, Mr. Braxton begins stating that he was concerned about these illegal campaign contributions that Kathy Durbin was looking into. By the way, there had been a complaint filed with regard to these illegal campaign contributions. And so Kathy Durbin had processed it and went through. I'm not going to rehash all of that. However, only to say that Mr. Braxton will indicate that he was working with Miss Durbin. And most of you know that Miss Durbin was not very popular. At the time that I began, the very first meeting I filmed, that was the meeting at which she resigned, put that word in quotes. But at any rate, looking on paragraph 4, it says that he had observed or had been apprised of the improprieties on December 18, 2015, which ironically is right in the same time frame that his daughter got the DWI. But I want to emphasize there was no report done by that officer or that letter, the infamous letter about Braxton allegedly saying all this, wasn't done the next day and so forth. It waits till 6 months later, and the lawsuit's going to make very obvious the connotation that this is, number one, been fabricated. They say it's all lies. Okay, when I say they, Calvin Braxton and his attorney, Jill Kraft, who also happens to be Kathy Durbin's attorney, so you have some efficiencies there because all of this stuff is interlocked. But at any rate, on paragraph 4, it says that the improprieties of political donations being made by members of the Louisiana State Troopers Association through its executive director, David Young. You will note that we have videotaped Mr. Young on a couple of occasions in meetings, but if you skip on to paragraph 6, it says that petitioner, that being Calvin Braxton, began an investigation. I've got all of this highlighted. And he discovered that the LSTA executive director, that's David Young, had been making political contributions to various political candidates in his name, but that he was reimbursed by the LSTA from dues collected by the LSTA from its members, including current active members of the State Police Classified Service. All of which would not be proper, and as many of you know, the campaign contributions to the Edwards administration, the campaign of Governor Edwards, they were refunded, and the State Police Commission sought to have a, quote, investigation of the matter. Ironically, they used Governor Edwards as a super PAC director and attorney, T. Taylor Townsend, to conduct, and he was paid $75,000 to get to the bottom of this. And we've got numerous features about T. Taylor Townsend. You just go into the search bar and put Townsend in there, you're going to see him start coming up. But at any rate, now this is something that is new. Going to paragraph 7, or at least it's relatively new. I think there's been some other blog posts on it. But in paragraph 7, we read about a private bar, all right, that was being operated at Louisiana State Police Training Center on a workplace site on state property that was not licensed, and it's a violation of Louisiana law. And it says the petitioner, that's Mr. Braxton, reported his findings to his fellow commission members and to several members of the Louisiana State Police, including its superintendent and high-ranking LSP officials. Now, if you see in paragraph 8, they begin to say Mr. Braxton was retaliated against from having done this. Let's go to paragraph 9. Now, this one is really, really important. I mean, there's nothing that would be non-important, but I want to focus in on paragraph 9 pretty strongly. Talking about in January 2016. Now, this is right as Governor Edwards is being inaugurated, okay? We've got the transition. Jindal's on the way out. Edwards is the new man on the block. So here in January of 2016, a telephone call from then special counsel to the commission. Now, it doesn't specify who that is, but there's only one special counsel they hired, and that's T. Taylor Townsend, okay? Governor Edwards is a super PAC chairman. okay, or the head of his super PAC. So I want to emphasize that because I'm going to read this one slowly, okay? Paragraph 9. A telephone call from then special counsel, who should be T. Taylor Townsend, to the commission, who advised that he needs to resign from the commission, and if you do not resign, this would be Mr. Braxton, defendant LSTA will release information damaging to you and your family. Okay? At the commission's January 2016 meeting, petitioner publicly questioned defendant LSTA's counsel, Mr. Floyd Falcon, and its executive director, Mr. Young, about the supposed letter and its location. Let's keep going. If we get into the next paragraph, you're going to talk about the trooper that had pulled over Mr. Braxton's daughter for first offense DWI, speeding, improper lane usage, and an open container violation. And it says that Oliphant, that's the gentleman that was the supervisor over the trooper. I believe you pronounce his name Linebaugh, and it says that Oliphant telephoned petitioner about his daughter's arrest, of which petitioner was already aware. Defendant Oliphant, by the way, Mr. Oliphant is named individually in this lawsuit as well as the LSTA. Defendant Oliphant would later claim that he called petitioner, quote, as a courtesy. But such phone calls by LSP officers, especially of the rank of captain, like Oliphant, rarely, if ever, occur. By the time of defendant Oliphant's telephone call, petitioner's daughter had already accepted responsibility for her actions and hired a lawyer. Petitioner's daughter was an adult, and somewhere in the petition, I may not have it highlighted, but it says that she went through the pretrial intervention or diversion program. Skipping to paragraph 11, Oliphant contacted petitioner on at least 3 conversations, and during the conversations, Oliphant broached the subject with petitioner about if he, Oliphant, should discipline or take action against the arresting officer. Well, that's one hell of a contrast between what was placed into that letter. I don't know which version's true, okay? They can't be both true. Somebody's telling the truth and somebody's lying, all right? That's just the bottom line. These two versions of event are like night and day, okay? The original version that went out on the Lee Zurich feature stated that it was Braxton who was throwing his weight around. Just go look. We have a link for the Zurich feature. I would strongly encourage you to watch that, because it didn't just end with Braxton. The next day there was on the Moon Griffon show, Mr. Zurich was a guest. This thing was widely disseminated, so it's going to be very interesting if Mr. Braxton has indeed been set up as a result of him being sympathetic to Kathy Durbin. And I can tell you right now, he was extremely sympathetic to Kathy Durbin. But, you know, all I can tell you is we got two sharply contrasting assessments of what transpired. Let's skip down to paragraph 13. On June, this is where we're getting to the meat of it. On June the 2nd, 2016, nearly 6 months after the arrest of petitioner's daughter, defendant Oliphant inexplicably authored a, quote, inexplicably. They're going to argue that the explanation is I was helping Kathy Durbin and y'all were going after her with everything you had, and I was defending her. That's why you suddenly fell out of bed and decided to fabricate. And they're saying it is a total fabrication, okay? Completely false and obviously defamatory. That's the basis of his suit. 6 months after the arrest of petitioner's daughter, defendant Oliphant inexplicably authored an incident report accusing petitioner, that's Braxton, of committing the crimes of public intimidation, threatening an officer, and interfering with an investigation, all as set forth in that June 2nd, 2016 document. If you click on our feature for Calvin Braxton, you'll have a link for that document if you'd like to take a look at it. Let's go to paragraph 15. Oliphant and the LSTA then caused the June 2nd, 2016 document to be published to the media, Well, at that point I may be wrong, but I think it actually got published by one blogger. However, he's pretty prominent. So the document to be published to the media, Governor Edwards, the State Police Commission, and its members and employees, and several prominent public officials. The publication was effectuated through an LSTA letter dated July 11, 2016, a copy of which is attached hereto and made a part hereof. In that July 11, paragraph 16, in that July 11, 2016 publication, defendants LSTA and Oliphant not only falsely accused petitioner of committing crimes, but specifically sought criminal prosecution of petitioner and removal of office. I think that's the biggest thing they wanted, was removal from office. Paragraph 17, the contents of the June 2nd, 2016 report and July 11th, 2016 letter are false. Going down to paragraph 18, petitioner refused to resign and even considering the pressure exerted upon him by the defendants to do so. Looking at paragraph 19. In June of 2017, the commission was set to release its report concluding that the LSTA had troopers had unlawfully made the political contributions. Paragraph 20. June 19, 2017, again accusing petitioner of several crimes, seeking prosecution of petitioner and public hearing against petitioner regarding the false charges. Included with the June 19, 2017 letter, a complete copy of which is attached hereto with the original July 11, 2016 letter and the June 2nd, 2016 letter. Now bear in mind, this is what made Governor Edwards look so bad, that he had sat on this for a whole year. And what's being revealed here, to be blunt, makes him look even worse, because now we're starting to see a possible reason why he sat on it. Because on the face of it, it's, you want to run on this honor code, and you knew about this for a frickin', and Lee Zurich directly confronted him, or attempted to. And the other reporters, oh God, I forgot, Katie Moore. I get older, things don't come. We also have a link for Katie Moore feature, but she did directly ask Matthew Block, why haven't y'all done something about this? It's been over a year. We're starting to perhaps get an idea, at least one explanation for why they might not have done anything. It's not exactly true. Oh, that'd provide a darn good explanation why he didn't do anything. It would also provide a damn good explanation for why Calvin Braxton would not go quietly in the night. Now, I don't know which version is accurate. I'm just plugging in some pieces as to why some of these seemingly bizarre accounts would take place. But I want to emphasize that you still can't get around the fact that according to these pleadings, that special counsel, T. Taylor Townsend, engaged in extortion acts. And I told you a long time ago, there can only be one reason that T. Taylor Townsend won't produce a report of his findings. And I said either it implicates him, it implicates the governor, or it implicates both of them. And if these pleadings are accurate, and they're supposed to be, it looks like it implicates both of them, and it implicates Governor Edwards pretty bad. The statements by defendants to LSTA and Oliphant were made with malice, actual and implied, and further, as the statements were defamatory per se, any requirement of demonstrating malice is dispensed with. They're saying that this is so clear-cut defamatory that, go to paragraph 23. On February 2nd, 2018, now this gets real interesting too. Now we're talking about Oliphant again. On February 2nd, 2018, Mr. Braxton had made a public records request to defendant Oliphant and the Louisiana State Police. Petitioner contends that a copy of his February 2nd, 2018 public records request was also provided to defendant LSTA. Paragraph 24. Now this is a state police captain, all right? And we're going to start hearing thoughts that he's scared to death of Calvin Braxton. You are freaking law enforcement, and you're up here posting on Facebook about how scared you are? Boy, I tell you what, I'm not real sure I'm overly comfortable with it being you. If this isn't fabricated, If this is legitimate and taken at face value, and I highlighted quite a bit here, and we're going to read it, that's a pretty scary thought that you might be the one called out to handle a crime scene or to deal with a potentially problematic situation. Let's read this. And this Facebook thing was screen saved, and I believe it was up on another blog as well, I think, at least for a while. But anyway, it didn't stay up too long for obvious reasons. And can you imagine a state trooper posting this kind of stuff? But it will possibly explain the lengths you'll go to when the whole world's collapsing around you because of fabrication. Now, I'm not saying they did fabricate it. Well, obviously the petition does. That's not for me to decide. It'll be for a jury to decide or a judge. But at any rate, on paragraph 24, Oliphant's Facebook page, quote, "I refuse to succumb to personal attacks purely due to an ethical decision I made in December 2015, referring directly to his false accusations the petitioner threatened and or intimidated him. This local businessman," that would be Braxton, "has allegedly hired private investigators or, quote, someone, unquote, to follow me and watch my every move. I have observed a suspicious vehicle near my residence, which have been confirmed to have a direct connection with this local and wealthy businessman. This one has me concerned simply due to safety reasons." Well, I don't know what it speaks to. You're the one we're supposed to call on when we have concerns. And you're up here. Like I said, it's not a real comforting, even if it's true, even if this whole thing wasn't fabricated, to excuse away what happened when you get into panic mode. Whew, boy. "This one has me concerned simply due to safety reasons, falsely asserting and or implying that petitioner would cause him physical harm. This is a clear and obvious attempt to continue to intimidate and retaliate against me for not giving him what he wanted, in that I adamantly refuse to reassign and or relocate the officer who arrested his daughter. Due to the decision I made in December 2015, not only am I still paying for it, but the arresting officer is as well." And you can see in paragraph 25 the reiteration that all of this is false and defamatory. So there you have the two contrasting accounts of what happened with this one DWI incident and the days thereafter. I would be remiss if I did not say that nothing in what I'm about to say proves anything, but I would submit to you, if you take a look at all the people that have been ousted in one way or another, when these contributions came to light, 4 retired state troopers, longtime members of the association, were expelled. Okay? That would tend to let you know that we're very angry about this bubbling to the surface. We're going to do what we damn well please, and God knows we've got video coverage of them going in there and all but telling the State Police Commission, we're going to make political contributions. If we have to sue the blank out of you to do it, that's what we'll do. Okay? 4 retired troopers, Kathy Durbin, if these are accurate, Calvin Braxton, and Lloyd Grafton was another one that, now he did just up and, he got fed up, let's put it that way, but he was an outspoken gentleman, and I don't think he had much favor, I know he didn't, with the Troopers Association either. Now, I'm going to wrap this up because obviously, now this was filed up in Natchitoches, so it's not going to be the easiest thing to track. But we will keep on top of it. Where there's a will, there's a way. It would be a lot easier for me if it was down here, but it's not. But I'm going to wrap this up, and we're going to provide you with the link, both for the feature that Sound Off Louisiana did with regard to what I bluntly referenced as raw, naked exploitation that this organization has engaged in to raise funds so that they can make political contributions. And I'm also going to give you what was an outstanding article written by Scott McCabe, because I asked him as a favor, because I felt like I was too entrenched and too close to this, I asked him as a favor if he would write the initial article, and then I followed up 5 or 6 weeks later. Those efforts to raise those funds, which now may obviously be needed to pay the defense costs of this lawsuit. You know, David Young flatly said, if we can't make these political contributions, we're going to go out of business. I mean, he said it. I don't know how you existed for 35 or 40 years, or ever how long it was, as so many troopers have told me. Didn't need them back then. Now all of a sudden the thing would collapse. But I'm going to wrap this up, you know, in case I have heard some sentiment that, well, what good suing the LSTA? Can you get blood out of a turnip? Well, I want to dispel that notion, because relatively speaking, it is the Louisiana State Troopers Association that is the huge bulldog in terms of finance and resources, and it's the LSPC that's on this limited budget each year from the legislature. And we're going to go ahead and give you copies of the 2016 financial statements, and we put them in very short thing, because I, as a CPA, I know I will fall to sleep fairly quickly if you start going into the nuances of financial statements, but we're just going to say that to dispel the notion. I mean, Calvin Braxton can now clamp his claws into some of this money, which may be an interesting situation. I'll let it go with that. But if you look at it, you will see there's cash in the form of the State Association of $250. This is the December 31st, 2016 statement. It's the most recent that I had. $259,000, and there was also troop affiliates with $168,000. But I want to skip on down to investments of $1.1 million. You know, that's a decent chunk of change. And if you go to the next page, the next exhibit we have below this video, you will see the composition of those. You have equities and options that are at a fair market value of almost $250,000. Money market funds, that's ready cash, about $18,000. Stock mutual funds at $743,000. I would note that they paid $695, so they got a decent, about a 10% return. And then there's alternative investments that are $229,000. The fact that that number has stayed the same and didn't vary makes you figure that that's probably a fairly illiquid investment that doesn't have a lot of volatility. For those who would care to delve, maybe you can find out what that is. But if you go to the final exhibit, you get these appeal for funds, and they're important to the LSTA. And I have highlighted under their revenues, again, this is for year 2016, $423,000. All right, so that's about $1,300 a day, every day, that is taken in from members of the public, such as yourself, and that almost is enough to offset the administrative expenses of running the LSTA, which were $441,000. It has virtually no debt, and so you'll see the net assets at the bottom. That's basically the net worth of the organization, which is quite liquid. So it's not a false it's a false perception to believe that Mr. Braxton would be just whistling in the dark and can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. This turnip has blood. I don't know if he's going to be successful or not. I don't know which of the two assessments is accurate. If this thing makes it a trial, I'll make it a point to go and stay in a hotel and watch the whole thing, even though it is in Natchitoches. But we'll continue to stay abreast of it. But that's today's Sound Off Louisiana feature. I want to thank all of our dedicated viewers, and we look forward to bringing you yet another feature very soon. Robert Burns, thank you so much again to all of our loyal viewers.